What it is, y'all, it's your old boy Pilk, and we need to talk about episode 11 for both good and bad reasons. But if this is the first time on the channel, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. We only have one episode of Wistoria left, but we are going to be covering the manga, and because you guys did request that very heavily. And the new season of Danmachi is coming out really soon, and we'll be covering that as well. So, let's jump into this, because first things first, story-wise, I have no complaints. There were a couple things that I did notice right out of the chute, but if I'm totally honest here, it's still 9 out of 10. Fantastic. Sound design, as always, is just, next to perfection, so no real arguments there. The one thing I wanted to discuss, and this is before we get into the overall, I guess, spoilers of the episode, the animation itself left me wanting on this episode. This is the first time in this season that I felt like the animation was way lower than what I expect out of Actus. I really didn't... I enjoyed the episode overall. Fantastic episode. For them not to do a little preview part of the beginning and all that makes tons and tons of sense. Because we just basically get into the action. Everything that we need for the lead up, we got in the prior episode. But when it comes to the overall production in the anime, it really did leave me wanting quite a bit more. The honest answer here is, guys, normally with, and I said in the previous episode, when we get later on in the series, sometimes they will save, the best for last, and some of these episodes might suffer a little bit so that the real climax can shine, and then they'll clean up that animation and, throw it on the DVD, Blu-ray, whatever. And the honest answer here is, if this episode has a better version out there, that's what they should have given us. They should have sacrificed some of those cooldown episodes, or maybe some of the lead-in episodes, or some of the mid parts of episodes. They should have sacrificed a little bit more to make sure this episode was everything it could be. Because this really is the climax episode. And I have the unfortunate suspicion that the next episode is going to be absolutely spot on. And this is the episode... Well, this episode and the next episode are the two that should leave you wanting more. That should really, impress. And overall, a lot of the movements and things were very jarring. The main villain, the Grand Duke, his animation was just all over the place. Expressions would change from, literal, shot to shot. Even the stylization of the character, or the monster, whatever, it's still a character, would just change from shot to shot. It was very inconsistent. So, overall, I did enjoy it, but I find it really, really, really hard to give this a high score. Now, I'm often one of these people that say that a 5 out of 10 is an average score, and I do still think overall this series was above average by a huge margin. And I'm going to give this a 6 just in animation alone, because they did some things very well. There's a lot of detailed shots, and there's a lot of there's great composition. But a lot of times motion was very clearly like a still frame that they just moved in 2D space. Or maybe even sometimes 3D space, or 2.5D space, if you're familiar with compositing software and all that. Basically just forcing perspective and making things essentially just kind of grow on screen. Hard to explain, but it is a thing. 2.5D is a thing in animation. It's frustrating overall. And I didn't mean to harp on this for 5 solid minutes, but the reality is, I've got to be critical and I've got to be honest with myself. This episode could have been a lot stronger. And when you are going into an animated medium, and animation is your main thing, that's the part that should be on point. If you miss a little bit in the music, people will forgive, and for the most part, most fans will just never notice it. Fully designed, the actual sound effects and things like that, you can miss here and there and then fix it, for the later release. No one will notice. But I feel like an episode this pivotal, and frankly, this kind of undercooked, for lack of a better way to put it, just kind of left me a little upset. I won't lie. I know the studio. I expect more out of the studio. One of their very early projects, something near and dear to my heart, X Driver, was fantastic. And to see this out of them is just very disappointing. Granted, that was an OVA in a movie, but never no major TV related timelines in that. But to see over 20 years of difference between that product and this product is just very jarring. So, by and large, I enjoyed the episode. Story-wise, it was fantastic. We'll go ahead and get into some spoilers here, and I'll try not to make this another half-hour review. But we got no intro. We essentially hit the ground running. In fact, I almost, if I can criticize one other thing, I love how the last episode, they didn't really have an outro sequence. In fact, they did the main series outro kind of at the end of this episode. I would almost have preferred if they had run the musical score, if they had run, the credits and all that over top of all the action occurring. Now, as a former AMV creator, that would drive me insane. But as a fan and somebody who just wants more and more and more out of the series, I would love that. I would absolutely love that. So, I really kind of expected what we got with the end credits as the opening credits. Maybe it's expecting too much, but I thought that would have been really cool. So that we just get more and more and more of this action. But really, the whole episode was solid action. So I'm going to go ahead and get into spoilers now. So if you guys don't want spoilers, if you haven't watched the episode or whatever, that's my review. That's my criticism. If I'm being too harsh, let me know in the comments. And from this point on, everything is spoilers. Let's get going. So, and there is just a incredible amount to discuss here. So when we left off, we know that the Grand Duke was basically attacking them. He'd been launched by Headless and the other dude, I forget his name, and they're like, it's a 240 point villain, and that's all we know. Like, this guy is going to go crazy. And the one thing I don't think that the characters really took to heart, or they didn't really fully understand until much later in the episode, is that this is not just a monster in the dungeon. Legitimately, this is a monster under the control of those two, or at least Headless. So, yeah, that's pretty nuts. That does tell you where they are at level-wise. Like, they are leaps and bounds beyond the characters we have now. One thing I did absolutely love, though, during the battle is very early on, I happened to notice, essentially, they are the mini Magiavander. Like, you have one of every elemental type here, just like the Magia has, and all said and done, they worked really well together. In fact, I love that whole sequence where, while they're kind of regrouping after they sort of slowed him down, you have Julius that, threw a bunch of ice magic at him and just kind of impeded him a little bit. It wasn't really like the end of the world, but they happen to realize, they're like, Will is not here as our shield. Early on when they fell into the dungeon, Will was looking for his place in the team. And I can't remember her name for the life of me, but anyway, the one who prior to this was the leader of the group, the one who formed the group, she's like, I'm the knight. Will's like, well, they're not great at close range, so I'll be close range. And she immediately goes out there like a lightning bolt and just starts taking dudes out. And so naturally, he's just kind of like, well, where do I fit now? Like, what is my purpose here? And he found out today that his purpose is not the shield. His purpose is the leader. And it makes a lot of sense. I mean, they even notice they're like the mages, the wands as they call them. They are able to like basically take range and start doing attacks. Like Julius does a great thing here. He's basically kind of coached by Will in how to do this one magical spell, which I love that Will's able to coach him and not do it himself. He's the book learner. Of course he's going to know this stuff. But basically it's a spell that allows him to continuously cast even when his doppelgangers are taken out. Another thing I love about this episode is the fact that they really kind of take all of the elements from the prior episodes. We saw the fire, the Phoenix back. We saw the lightning bolts from Mo Girl back. We saw the illusion magic finally like take shape and manifest like it should from Wignall. We really saw like the culmination of everything we have learned. Now, I will say, if there's another criticism I have, I do feel like our elf there, I do feel like he just kind of had like his epiphany a bit too early. Like, he had his epiphany, but he should have to work at it. No, he just like was, okay, the power of trust and friendship, and now I can do whatever I want. And it felt like that was a bit too MacGuffin-ish, but, it is what it is. Yeah, things just kind of pop off. But they're still not really able to do much against the monster. And that's when Will realizes, like, it's his wings. His wings are basically invulnerable. We have to get rid of those wings. And they just try everything they can to and nothing's really working. And we saw it in the opening. We saw Will's goggles, like, shatter and break. And he completely, those are the ones that Elfie gave him. He lost control of himself when that happened. Now, early on in the series, and before I read in the manga, I did kind of theorize that maybe those glasses, I kind of thought maybe they were like a magical item that Elfie had given him, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. Either that or they just haven't done the reveal yet. But he didn't seem to be hindered at all, aside from, like, psychologically. And, of course, Sion really just goes over there and beats the snot out of him and is like, hey. Which I love, because he's like, he's asking Sion, he's like, hit me. And Sion goes over there and just starts wailing on him. Which at first you're like, that's a bit excessive. But not really, because it's not like he's physically strong. He's a mage. He's not, he basically skipped arm day and went straight to magic day, flick of the wrist, not flick of the bicep. So really him having to just knock the snot out of Will makes sense, because Will's probably like completely unfazed by the whole thing. It just snaps him back into into order. And well, one thing leads to another, and essentially he comes up with a plan. And he happens to realize, like, the sword can't do it by itself. The wand can't do it by itself. So we are going to combine the two. So he's basically able to have Colette do what she did during the sorry, not the Praxis, but that tournament, and basically form a sword. But she forms like the biggest, craziest sword she could. And he comes down and he's able to actually take off one of the Grand Duke's wings. And that was super cool. I was like, that's great. But how are you going to finish this thing off? And of course, then because you got to have the main rival guy and you've got to have the pro tag work together, he abused the sword with his fire magic. And he just goes and is able to cleave this thing clean in two. And I absolutely loved it. Now, this super abbreviated version of this, if you guys haven't watched the episode, do go watch it. Even with all my criticisms of the animation style, it still was a great watch. Overall, like a 7 out of 10. Considering, like 5 is an average, well above average. Just that animation really did drag it down. But, all said and done, I really loved this episode. I won't say I love this episode. I enjoyed the episode. I really want the animation to improve. So I'm hoping when we get the home release of this, the Blu-ray release, I will be buying the series, and when it comes out, and I will be looking back at this episode and seeing, did it improve? Because I really feel like they need to improve this episode a lot. But by and large, we'll come back and revisit this once we get a Blu-ray release. For now, that's episode 11. We have episode 12, which is kind of like the finale, the cool down episode, and probably the lead into season 2. We have enough chapters of the manga out. We could get into season 2, maybe even 3. I wouldn't be shocked if there was like a year gap between seasons, but I don't know. We'll see. We will probably find out more about that here in the coming weeks. But for now, that's Season 1, Episode 11 of Wistoria Wand and Sword. Episode 12 will be out next week. We'll cover that. And then I think the week after that is when Danmachi kicks off. So, a lot to talk about there. Like, comment, share all the good stuff, and I'll be back with more coming in real soon.